I don't believe in soulmates. I don't believe in love at first sight. I believe in infatuation at first sight.
Yeah.
I believe in attraction at first sight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I believe in high compatibility at first interaction. Okay, cool. I don't believe in love at first sight.
Well, happy Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's Day. Morbid relationship, no.
We are back. It is happy Valentine's week,
Valentine's week already. I feel like it's just gone so fast.
So, yeah, I mean, 2025 already, so...
It's here.
Do you remember your first Valentine?
No. Goodness, no. I don't even remember my first Valentine's from my wife.
Oh, yeah.
But partially because we don't celebrate Valentine's Day, really.
Yeah.
Like, we might say something or do something, but it's not like...
Yeah.
It's not a big
Yeah.
thing that we do.
Yeah, and one thing that I know, but maybe everyone doesn't know, is you've been with your wife for quite a bit.
Yeah.
Since high school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
So...
Yeah. Yeah, we
makes
met.
sense why you don't remember.
Yeah, right? Like, I guess, yeah. We've been together 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. But yeah, we met in high school, and we dated other people initially, and then got together our senior year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're one of the lucky ones.
You could say that. Yeah.
Because what I'm hearing, what I find is that whenever you pass the college schooling years,
Yeah.
the dating
Pool.
prospects, the dating pool falls off a cliff.
I keep hearing that, but again, I can't personally attest to that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an interesting note too, because obviously I would say by most standards, like, we dated young and arguably even got married young. And
How old are you when you got married?
I was 20.
You got married when you were 20?
I got married when I was 20. Yeah.
Wow.
It was a thing.
Dude.
It was a thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's young, dude.
Yeah, it was young. It was very young. I don't recommend it.
Okay. Okay.
And I would say that we're fortunate in that, hey, like, we were able to grow independently and together. So I would say, like, I learned a ton. It was very much trial by fire, which was appropriate. But I wouldn't recommend that to most.
Right. Yeah. And then you guys had kids pretty much later on.
Way later. Yeah, we waited
10 years, right?
Yeah, we waited 10 years.
Wow,
which,
that's...
Yeah, thank God we did, because had we had kids earlier, I'm not sure we would have been able to stay together in that context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Well, it's... I think it's apt that we talk a little bit about dating.
Okay.
Being Valentine's week,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And there's, again, so many directions we could go. I want to start with an article that I read recently.
Okay.
By Rob Henderson. He's a sociologist.
Did you send this to me?
I did
Okay.
send it to you.
All right. Cool.
Over text.
Awesome.
And there are a few snippets that
Yeah.
I want to highlight. So he kind of references a few studies and books on dating.
Dateonomics.
Yeah,
This guy.
Dateonomics.
Okay.
Dateonomics is a big one.
Yeah.
By John Berger. I think I pronounced that hopefully close to correct.
Yeah.
And he describes a lot of like the dating scene in especially like college campuses.
Yeah.
Nowadays, where basically depending on the sex ratio of that campus, you'll see different dating trends, right? So if you have more women than men, you'll see a certain pattern of dating. And then if you have more men than women, you'll see a certain pattern of dating. And then he referenced other studies, like looking at countries where this is the case. Like, so it seems to be a trend, right? And the trend is that when you have more men than women, the women kind of have the upper hand in terms of selecting, right? Because they're fewer. So the men are competing for the fewer women. And so most women are seeking long-term relationships, right? And they found that you'd end up seeing more long-term relationships take place because the men would try to compete for the women seeking those long-term relationships, right? The opposite was the case when there was more women, which is now the case, and especially in the West and probably around the world,
Sure.
where more women are getting educated. So in college campuses, you usually find a high ratio of women to men. And so that means the women are not competing for the fewer men, and the fewer men prefer casual dating instead of long-term relationships. And so they're less committal. You know, they're like, I have options. Why should I commit to one person? And so what you find is there's just less satisfying long-term relationships being made in those settings. And it seems to be a challenge. It seems to be a problem.
Yeah.
For in that case.
Well, it sounds like, so I think that's interesting because obviously I think you and I would articulate this as a problem. I think perhaps most men on college campuses would say this is a great problem to have.
Right.
Simply because there's plenty of options. However, I would say that if we're trying to live a moral life, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it does create a scenario for problems.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I was reading what you sent, and I hadn't read that before. I believe that, though, just based on, okay, like work in college campuses, whether that was, for the University of Tennessee or working near James Madison, I would say that's absolutely appears to be true. It's also interesting, though.
Yeah, you've worked with a bunch of college students.
Yeah.
In your counseling practice. Yeah.
Probably the majority of my experience is with collegiate age students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you did see some.
So I would say those trends absolutely looked to be the same. And although it's interesting to me to articulate like that makes a lot of sense. I think it's also, admittedly, I think it's sad. Right? Because I think that what happens is that you have people that are all of a sudden underselling themselves, right? Women in particular, right? They're underselling themselves to say, okay, well, I guess we need to try to meet the trend that men want. And so, like, I believe that at one point in the article, it was indicating that, say, for instance, like just men later in life, when there's more options available, they're less likely to remain committed to the same woman throughout childbearing years. Right? And so I think that's interesting. It's also very sad, but I think that trend, I believe that trend starts earlier, right? If you're used to engaging in relationships in that way, right? Earlier on, I think you have a greater probability of engaging in relationships and viewing them in that way later on as well, right? It's not to say that it's always that way.
Right.
But I would say that certainly if I have a pattern that I establish with how I engage in something, then it would make sense that pattern is going to continue unless it's addressed. And I would say it's a sad thing, I think, especially for women. And especially it's also very ironic, too, because I think with how much emphasis in our society today is placed on women's rights, fair treatment, equal treatment. Right.
Yeah.
And yet there's this great underselling. Right. This paradox here to where all of a sudden that exists, but now they're just lowering their standard.
Right.
Yeah. To assimilate to what they believe that men want. But I think what's really sad about that is most men in college don't know what they want.
Yeah. They don't know what they want.
No.
Yeah.
No. So they're and what happens, I think, more often is that they don't know what they want, so they just are hesitant to make any decisions. So that then is identified as, oh, well, okay, they must want this. And because men don't know what they want and perhaps haven't matured enough to understand that, no, I really want this and this is how I'm going to live, they're like, okay, sure. Whatever.
Yeah, because one of the things the article emphasized too is that women will either undersell themselves or they'll kind of lean more into men are trash kind of like not engage in relationships.
Yeah,
we can
stay away.
Stay away, because it's like this is the best we got. And so with that, there's also this trend of the fact that more women are getting educated.
Yeah.
And education typically leads to higher income.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But the data still shows that women want a partner who has similar or higher education than them. Or if they don't have that education, they have similar or higher income. Right?
Yeah.
To signal like, hey, this man takes care of himself. He can provide. Maybe if I need to take a step back, if I want to raise kids, have a child, right? They're still looking for men who are equally as successful or more successful than them, which creates another challenge.
Yeah.
Because there's just not as many, statistically, men who are pursuing education. So it's like the question is like, so what do we do about that, right? Like, is it that women need to change what they value? Because I was talking to a friend about this, and I asked her. I actually sent her this article.
Okay, yeah.
And she's a single, highly successful, she's paid well, highly educated woman, and she told me that the only way she would date someone who didn't earn as much or was not as highly educated as her was if he had the it factor. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. What do you think is the it factor? Yeah. When you hear that, what do you think of that?
So I'm thinking two things. One, I guess the most basic premise would be he's making up for it in other ways. Right.
Exactly.
And okay, so presumably we might say, okay, he's like a very handsome, strong man, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps, presumably we might say that. Or he is overwhelmingly able to compensate for where she is not. But I'm curious, what is that? And tell me what.
Right. So I asked her that. I was like, what's the it factor? And basically she's like, income and education to her signal certain characteristics.
Sure.
Right. But she was saying that there are cases where you may have those characteristics without
100%
tangible income and education. So she's like someone who's like dedicated to their personal growth, has strong integrity, has strong character.
Mm-hmm.
Like they may not have the job or the dollar bills. Maybe they're a teacher or something.
Yeah.
Right. But essentially I'm like, okay, so that's what is important more than the actual zeros behind your bank account.
Yeah.
Right. It's these characteristics that could be reflected in a successful paying job.
Yeah.
But not really. Right. Because I think that's where the treasure may lie for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is that maybe looking beyond the surface to like, okay, what is that? What is behind that?
Yeah.
What is behind the education? What is behind the income?
Yeah.
What is behind the looking for someone who's 6 feet tall?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
What is behind that? Why do you want someone taller than you?
Yeah.
Don't you want to feel protected?
I think for many that's how it exists. Right? I think intuitively, well, and maybe it's perhaps not necessarily intuitive, but it's rather subconscious. I would say that women desire a certain level of security from men, right? When they engage in relationships or with anyone, right? There's a certain sense of security that is desired inherently. And I think that's what your friend speaks to in many ways, because if there's high moral integrity, right, now there's a very high level of security in the relationship that there is stability here, right? And stability in a relational context to where I know that I can invest my efforts here and this is going to be secure and rock solid and it's going to be okay, right? And I would say that in many cases, what we have today is we have the equations like what I had mentioned previously of, okay, well, I'm going to say physical stature. I'm going to look to these things first. And I think partially that may be a biological mechanism. Mm-hmm. Right. You could argue that certainly. Now, I would say that most often today, though, finances are used as the metric to offer security in most instances, right? You may have, I would say something that I see frequently is either that young couples will get together initially saying that money doesn't matter. They just live and let love, right?
Yeah.
Like we can be gypsies together, but at a certain point that runs out.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't always exist that way because sooner or later your ability to survive and thrive become important. And then if you're desiring to bring children into the mix, well, now it's a totally different question because you get ready. You're going to care about something way more than you care about yourself or your partner. Right.
Right.
And it's going to shake everything for you.
Right. And now you need
and now
resources.
You will have security. Like that's what you will be vying for.
Right. So in that sense, there is validity to women's desire for someone who makes good money. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot of validity to it. The difficulty and challenge I think comes into play because that's perhaps the impulse rather, or the indirect impulse, but then especially if the character and moral value are not there to support that, well, now it's really needed.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Doubly.
Yeah, you got to make up for it somehow. So I think, and perhaps there's an argument to be made to say that, well, if my character's in line, then I'm going to work hard. If I work hard, then in some context, I'm going to provide. Right? And if I provide, then I'm going to provide a level of security. So to a degree, you could argue that, okay, there's going to be some sense of stability. You're not going to starve. You may not be making 6 or 7 figures, right? But there will be a certain sense of stability there. You know your partner will always work. You know your partner will work to be home on time. Perhaps will have fidelity for you, right? Those things matter. So I think that's where perhaps it's an easy equation to make.
Right.
At least that's my inclination. But tell me your thoughts. I'm interested.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think when you talk about dating, there's just so many dynamics that come into play when you're talking like on the ground, practical, right? So like a lot of, you'll hear men talk about how like, well, they won't say this, but it's kind of implied that, oh, this person may feel intimidated that the girl he's talking to makes more than him. Feels threatened in a way. So the woman is looking for a man who's not intimidated by her success and knowing that he can provide that security even though he doesn't make as much, right? So I look at my in-laws, like my father-in-law, like unashamedly will say that, hey, his wife makes way more than him, right? This is like the most secure dude ever, right?
Okay.
Most secure guy ever. But he does provide, like you said, security in other tangible ways, right?
Okay.
In terms of the integrity and character that he provides and leadership he provides to the family.
Okay.
But there's also that sense of like, listen, like at the end of the day, if we're in a marriage, if we're in a partnership, your success is my success in a way.
Sure.
And so I don't know if you've dealt with men struggling to reconcile that.
Yeah. Well, I think in traditional senses, especially, like that exists, right? Like and I would say perhaps even earlier in life, it's of greater challenge. So you mentioned your father-in-law, right? I would question how that would exist, say, if they were trying to have children.
Yes.
Earlier on, right?
Yes.
And it's not to say that can't happen, but it is to say that, okay, there has to be a high level of security in order for that to happen, right? And I guess to address your question of have I seen that? Absolutely. And I would say that, yes, like the easy thing to point to is a level of insecurity around, well, how do I reconcile this as on the part of the man? And I think part of that has to do with just the fact that, well, what are the goals of the couple or the relationship, right? Maybe he doesn't make as much, but does he need to? Right? Does he have to? What's actually needed? can he provide what's needed?
Mm.
And can that be enough? And perhaps even more importantly, can he make good decisions with what he has? I think those are bigger questions that often implicate, okay, how things look, right?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a certain level of security that can be garnered, especially from the guy to say, hey, yeah, my wife makes more than I do. It's great. Cool. Good for her. I think where that can become problematic, though, is if the guy is not in a profession that he truly desires, and he's not making as much because he hasn't found it yet. Right? Let's say they just got out of school and the guy wants a career, but he doesn't really know what he wants to do.
Yeah.
Woman has found her career. She's in it to win it, man. Right? She's
Yeah.
going full steam and she's good at what she does. I think that's a recipe for being lost, because now there's the game of comparison here, right? I think the same thing can happen when you have, say, one member of a partnership. Say maybe they're in their dream job, the other member's having like a terrible, hellacious time of it, and they just keep going. Right, they're in a position to where now, okay, maybe things at work are starting to get volatile, and they're just not sure what they're going to do. Meanwhile, say their girlfriend is just making bank, knocking down doors,
Promoted.
taking names, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, for them, what do they do? Right? What do they have to offer? Right?
Yeah.
Now, in most cases, I would say that what they have to offer heavily relies upon character, right? That
Yes.
I would say in all cases, really it does. Now, if they can understand that well enough, that becomes the challenge, right? That becomes the crux, because what's going to happen is they're going to antiquate their value with their achievement.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that gets very dangerous when we do that.
Yeah. Right. And I think you pointed to that earlier with the college students, where it's like, man, like the college boys, they don't know what they want.
No.
They're trying to figure it out. They don't know. And that does continue sometimes, where you are seeing, you'll see a woman pair with a guy who's maybe not so sure is in the right career, doesn't know what he wants. And I think that indecisiveness the security can feel precarious.
100%.
It's a lack of decisiveness. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
if you don't know what you want, how can I get in your boat?
Well, and how,
Because you
not
might
only
go
that,
this way. I'm trying to go this way. Yeah.
not only that, if you don't know what you want, how do you know you want me?
Ooh.
Right.
That's it.
It's a great question, and it's a fair question. How do I know you want me if you don't know what you want? How do I know? Because you're not showing me. I can't see that. You can tell me. What does that mean? Right? So I would say that's a big crux.
Well, that's a big crux, dude. Especially with this dynamic where there's so many women too. It's like, I don't know. It's like, dude, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to choose from, right?
Yeah.
And so Logan Uri she's a behavioral scientist.
Nice.
Who she's big in the dating space. She wrote a book called How Not to Die Alone.
Oh, nice.
And
Okay.
she referenced a lot of like really good studies. And she talks about these 3 dating blind spots that most people have.
Yeah.
And the big one here that we're talking about is maximizing.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Tell me what this means. I haven't heard of this.
So there's maximizing, minimizing, and then hesitating.
Okay.
Right? So there's maximizers, romanticizers, and hesitators.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, there you go.
Tell us
So
about this.
maximizers are people who essentially are trying to find the perfect person. Right? Romanticizers are people who they believe that the relationship itself should be perfect. And so they like what's the word?
Compensate?
No, it's very Disney like. So
They hype it up.
They hype it up.
So they put a rose on a turd.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then hesitators believe that they themselves are not ready to date, will never be ready to date, and so they don't make any decisions towards finding a mate, right? So you do find that in this dynamic where there are excess women in a specific environment and a few men, the men will tend to maximize. And I've seen this as I coached a few dudes who are just like, they want 5% better. That they can't commit. Because if I commit, what if there's something better for me?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, dude, I understand what you're saying. But at the end of the day, in a relationship, it doesn't come prepackaged. No. A good relationship doesn't come prepackaged.
No.
Right? A relationship is co-created. So at what point do you say, this is the decision I'm going to make? There might be a better person out there for me based on whatever factors you have in your head. But I'm going to go based on my decision, not based on, this is what you got. You got to deal with it now. And that thought of, could there be something better out there for me, is actually really not a helpful idea.
Not at all. I would say not at all.
Yeah.
I would also agree with you. I would say I see that a lot. I think there's 2 points that it sounds like you're saying that I think are really important to recognize. One, there will always be somebody else, or could always be somebody else, right? But for this reason, I also don't believe in soulmates.
There you go.
I don't believe in soulmates. I don't believe in love at first sight. I believe in infatuation at first sight.
Yeah.
I believe in attraction at first sight. Like, I believe in high compatibility at first interaction. Okay, cool. I don't believe in love at first sight.
Yeah. Soulmates.
Yeah. I don't believe in soulmates.
For you.
No, I don't buy that.
Yeah.
I think it's not helpful. And not because I'm not in love with my wife. I love my wife very much.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's helpful at all, because I think it's not true.
Yeah.
Right. I think what's most helpful is to understand that the choices you make determine the outcome that you have, especially in relationships, right? The choices you make towards someone and the choices you make towards that relationship, how you decide to be and exist in that relationship matter the most as far as how that relationship is going to turn out and whether or not you have love in that relationship. And that's what matters.
Yeah.
Right. I would say, it's another important point too to recognize that most guys, they also mature at a much slower rate. Their frontal lobe development isn't even there until they're 25, sometimes 30, right? Whereas for women,
much later.
For women, it's in the early 20s. So they're maturing. Yeah. They're developing much quicker than men are.
Yeah. So I guess that speaks to why women prefer older men in many cases.
I mean, it could, right? I would say that there's a number of factors there, though. Again, it could be related to a level of security. It could be related to the level of understanding what they want and what that looks like. But I wouldn't say it's terribly uncommon, for, say, a 20-year-old woman to be with a 25, 26-year-old guy, right? And I think the other thing to recognize that this study, the one that you sent, brings out a factor. But I think it would also be interesting to look at, okay, whether or not that was only done on collegiate campuses or whether that encompassed relationships in all contexts, right? So, and per se, all education levels, because I think what we're seeing today, or what we may see more of in the future, is guys not going to college.
Yeah.
And doing more trades.
Right.
I think we'll start to see a resurgence of that because tradesmen are becoming fewer and fewer, so the demand's going higher. With demand going higher, okay, your pay is also going to increase, right? Which means somebody that's an electrician or a plumber can make way more than my 4-year degree guy over here, right? Without any student loan debt, right? He's set, and he's 20 years old, right? Yeah. And so now all of a sudden, he's ready, right? Yeah. Or maybe he's 26 and he's already been working for 10 years, right? There's a lot of maturity that comes with that. Yeah. A lot of desirability that comes with that.
Yes. Right. So, I mean, that would be then a question for like the college educated woman. It's like, would that be a man that's desirable?
Yeah. And I would say perhaps for many, maybe this is where I think on the surface, maybe it would be, but they will never interact with them. That's why it would be so hard to find them. Like it'll be, a lower probability that they encounter someone like that.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I wish we could like solve all the dating problems in the world.
Right. We'll start our own matchmaking company.
Yeah, we should, because I mean, it's needed. Yeah, because that in itself, I think, is what's gonna change over time. Is that because typically how it has been is that you usually find your spouse and then places that you
exist at,
right? Whether you're at the school, you're at a workplace, but the graphs show that it's majorly it's online these days. People don't look to their in-person relationships to meet people. Even their friends, you don't look at that.
That's so interesting. I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that. I would say what I see by and large is that those relationships, don't last very long.
The online ones?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or B, they don't last very long.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
What?
Or B.
I think it's in many ways pretty self-explanatory. Would you buy a car that you just saw online?
Right.
Like,
right.
Would you? Or
Yeah.
do you go and drive it? But then even after that, you're like, I don't know. But I think many times people, and that's what happens is that, okay, yeah, sure, this looks great. Sounds great. I'm going to take the car out for a spin. It's just not what I thought maybe it was. Right? Or we just move too fast, because I think by nature, those scenarios are, the paradigm for that is that it's going to move quickly. I believe that from what I have seen and from what I have heard and understood, this is limited, so you can correct me because you're way better informed on how these, I would say most of these apps function. But I would wager that the app is set up to move things quickly, to make contact, to meet, right? To have connection fast, right? We talked previously a lot about the notion of, okay, being able to wait. We listened to it was like a Jerry Seinfeld stand-up, right? No one wants to be where they are.
Yeah.
Right. I would say in relationships, it's the same scenario. Like, okay, so now it's like, okay, with a swipe left or swipe right, I can meet this person. I can go be with them. Done. Right. And then, all right. Yeah. Then they hook up, whatever. Like, before you know it, a month later, they've moved in together. To me, it's a recipe for disaster.
A recipe for disaster, yeah. And the studies show that living with someone before you commit to them, like for marriage, usually ends up badly, right? Yeah. Because usually the girl and the guy have different motivations for the
100%.
A woman is like, okay, this is it. We're moving in. A guy's like, no, we're moving in for me to see.
For me to test it out further.
The waters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that creates some very complex dynamics.
Open window syndrome. Right. Or open door syndrome.
Yeah. I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not fully committed yet. We're just still seeing how it feels.
Yeah. And another thing with online relationships is that you don't have the social accountability that typical relationships need, I think, especially during dating.
Tell me about that.
So, when you meet a random person online, you're not automatically meeting their friends unless they voluntarily say, hey, come hang out with my buddies.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't see how they interact with their friends. You don't see what kind of social circles they inhabit.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just you and the other person. Versus if you naturally met somebody through your friends, all those questions are answered. Right? You're like, okay, these people have these certain values.
Yeah.
They live this certain way. I know this guy or this girl is associated with them.
Yeah.
Right? And then you also don't have the other accountability for yourself of like, hey, dude, like, why are you with this person? It's like dating is so much more isolated. And because we're not dating in community, as historically most people have done, that the lack of accountability impacts long-term relationships negatively.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you mean by accountability there, you mean like the way that we see people interact with others, right? How they're accountable to their friends and others around them for their character.
Right, exactly. Because how are you evaluating the other elements outside of your chemistry or your connection? Like, how are you evaluating other areas of compatibility?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, your character. Looking at, like, cultural practices. Like, how do they live life, or what are their customs of doing things? Things like that.
This is a really interesting point, because I think this just dawned on me. And I was questioning how it seems that now in today's society, or rather, and perhaps there's a study to refute this. Maybe, I'm sure there is in some form or fashion. But I feel like what I interact with on a high level a lot is a lot of jealousy, right, by men.
Oh,
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Like there's, or women as well. But it's like, oh, was he texting her? Was she texting him? Or did they like a comment on this or do something on that? And it's a lot of it is over either internet
technology.
Yeah, it's over a tech platform, right? It starts there.
Yeah, he's liking this girl's bikini pics.
Exactly. It's like what happened? Like, and so all of a sudden there's this high level of insecurity, but then also like potential volatility that takes place. And it just dawned on me that, like, because in most scenarios, I would say like, well, that's okay. I would say the first rule that and this perhaps is for another episode. But again, reiterating, we've talked before a little bit about the notion that, and this goes into like some of the 5 laws of love, right?
Yeah.
But one of them just in the notion that you don't own anyone or anything, therefore they can do whatever they want. So initiating a relationship isn't about ownership.
No.
It's a mutual desire to interact with each other. But it just dawned on me that if my relationship started on an online platform, right? If everything from its onset in the world that I live in is in that area, then my reality is now this area. So now I equivocate anything that happens in this area to be as real as my physical realm. And I think that's very problematic.
The conflation?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's very problematic.
Yeah. I mean, that's hard because it feels like online is here to stay in many ways.
100%. I
think. Like you know what I'm saying? Like there's no turning back. But at the same time, like, yeah, that's true. That's a challenge because how humans interact online is just, we become different people.
Oh,
you know,
like, I believe that. I don't, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't know if the last time I commented on a Facebook post or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect example. The ways that people will comment on certain people's posts. Yeah. It's like you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't say that in a live conversation. If you're looking at them face to face.
Yeah, and I think
probably wouldn't be as.
I think that's a problem if that, and I think that's perhaps the larger problem here is that many people operate in that form or fashion. So if they're operating in a notion that isn't authentic to how they desire to be, it's almost as if they have to recalibrate their moral compass.
Yes.
It's interesting. I remember years ago, I think it was like when Facebook first came out, I saw a cartoon of a guy, like he was sitting at a computer and he was wearing a gold chain and he had, a baseball cap on backwards, some sunglasses, and he had like gold teeth and he's typing at his computer and the caption wrote, "Internet thugs."
Okay.
Because talking shit in real life is too dangerous.
It's way too dangerous, dude.
And I couldn't help but be like, wow, that was
back
perfect.
in the day.
That was back in the day, right?
Get out.
And maybe that's still floating around somewhere, but
but it's so true.
But it's 100% true, I think. And I think at the end of the day, like in many ways, I think people have adopted this though, but just perhaps in a different way. Instead of, say, they're way more frivolous, right, with what they like, what they perhaps will say, be willing to say, who they talk to.
Yeah, but you have a lot of ghosting these
okay,
days.
So tell me what that is. I don't know what that is.
You cracking me
I'm assuming it means like
Yeah.
you go like, what is it, like unread or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that what ghosting is?
Yeah, that's what ghosting is.
Okay. Like you just leave somebody unread.
Yeah, like you leave them unread, or
And,
maybe
wait.
you'll be chatting. Let's say you match with someone and you're
Okay.
chatting on the dating app, and then all of a sudden you just don't respond. You just get tired, right? So that happens a lot more on dating apps.
Man.
Where it's like, okay, let's see where this goes.
So-
There's no courtesy. There's no, hey, this doesn't seem like it's working out. We're just not compatible. Like, no, there's no need for that because it's online. I don't know you. Haven't seen you. So I'm just going to ghost. I was never here. No need for courtesy because it's online. I'm not.
Honestly, in one
face-to-face.
context, I think in one context, I would say I support that because it's not a real place. Right? Like,
Yeah. Okay.
but in another
Yeah.
context, obviously it's very problematic because
It's
it is
real people.
it's real people. You are really interacting.
Yes.
But I would say that I would say that the truth is, and perhaps I view this as non-problematic because I don't put a lot of stock in those things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And perhaps this is what many others do, and which is why it's so problematic, because I wonder how many men are actually planning on finding their partner through an app like this.
Oh.
Right. So
Men specifically.
yes.
You said men specifically.
Yes, because I don't remember which study it was or when it took place, and maybe some others have come out to refute this, but like, say, motivations for interacting on a online dating site.
Mm-hmm.
More predominantly, typically women want connection or some type of commitment. More predominantly, men desire to hook up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not to say that women don't, right?
Yeah.
But more predominantly, that's typically what happens here.
Yeah.
So if I'm a guy, I'm going to be fine to ghost.
Yeah.
Because I don't actually care about the other parts of things. And if I'm a woman that understands how this works, I might also be fine to ghost because there's not actually anything that's really going to be substantial here. Now, if I believe that this is where my eggs are at, like I'm putting all my tokens in this basket, then I'm going to be heavily influenced and impacted by how these interactions take place. And I believe that's very problematic because you don't actually know these people. And all of a sudden we're giving them so much emotional control. We haven't even met them.
We haven't even met them.
Yeah.
But the level of weight we've placed on their words and actions.
Yes.
In the online realm is like,
we give them an inordinate amount of control and influence.
Yeah. I think that's part of the issue with online dating. A lot of people say it's exhausting. They're tired of it.
I believe that. It sounds exhausting to me.
Yeah. There's like the swiping, the endless swiping, the endless... This leads a certain direction and then just drops off a cliff, and then it's like, okay, back to square one. Back to swiping. Gotta create my profile. It's like, it's pretty exhausting.
Yeah.
But then a lot of people are like, how else am I going to find someone?
It's so wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That is the state of dating. 2025.
I wouldn't survive.
You wouldn't survive.
I wouldn't survive. Not perhaps both implicitly and just from a desire not to.
Yeah. I think there is a need for in some ways a return to more organic ways of meeting people for some of the reasons we highlighted earlier.
Yeah.
Just because of that, like people are different in person, right?
They are.
And maybe it's a matter of like opening your eyes, questioning some of your preferences, right? So one of the things we talk about is being firm on your values, but being flexible with your preferences, right? Yeah. Because sometimes we're just like so keen on like, no, they must be from this culture. I want this body type, and this perfume smell, and it's like,
That's a
dude.
list.
Yeah, right. And it's like, okay, bro, but you're like are you
all
not
of
Prince
those
Charming,
things?
bro?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have all those check boxes? Like,
Yeah.
can you actually list all of those things for yourself?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly, dude. It's like, let's be realistic, man. And so like really understand like what is it that you want out of this long-term relationship, and then being like, hey, is there some people that I interact with or friends of friends that I know that might meet these characteristics that I haven't considered.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
I think what's really sad about that too is that perhaps people like you were talking like maximizers, they're not even going to give the time of day to someone that wouldn't have some of these qualifications that might actually they might actually be very compatible with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think of perhaps the value then in just doing activities, for example, like whether that's at a gym, whether that's playing sports, whether that's I don't know, doing some type of club, right?
Yeah.
Like your prerequisite may not have been finding someone that participated in that same activity.
Okay.
But yet you discover somebody in that activity that actually has a lot of characteristics that you desire, but that weren't necessarily on your list.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But perhaps are actually way more important, because I think most people, or I should say most college students perhaps, don't adequately understand how much values and moral compass mean to them.
So that it means something, is just to understand how much it means.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They're not able to articulate that or really see how much that means, partially because they haven't been in a context of life to where it impacts them that greatly.
Right. Being consequential.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
But when it does, I think that's when they start to see some of these pieces, and that's where it's like, oh wow, like this person actually, they're a really great person.
Yeah.
They don't maybe have any of the characteristics that I thought that I wanted.
Yeah, on paper.
Yeah.
But
wow.
Yeah.
Really great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think for that reason, I just agree. I think going back to a more organic way of interacting with people would be extremely helpful for the longevity of relationships.
That's it, right? Because it's like, what's the point if you meet them for a few months?
Yeah.
It doesn't go anywhere.
I'm sure we have more relationships now than we've ever had before. Right? I'm sure more people are getting in relationships than ever have before.
Yeah. Yeah. However,
your divorce rate's not going down.
It's not.
Right.
It's not going down.
But now we also have to I think now we're also entering this phase too, to where less and less people care about marriage.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, I think, very sad.
Yeah. Sad, but I guess some people are like, look, the numbers don't look too good.
Yeah, why would we try it?
Why would I try? Yeah. Why commit? It feels like you're being in prison.
Yeah.
For many people. Cool. No, I love that. And you know what? If you want to do online, I think there are still some niche services, niche places you can go where you can find people who have, at least they can vet people with similar values than you. But I feel like the general online, just like hitting up Tinder, hitting up a Hinge, at your own risk, right? At your own risk. Be ready. Yeah. Be ready for the Wild West that is online dating.
It's funny because I've certainly had clients in the past, and the conversation typically goes like they'll bring up, well, I got on Tinder and it's like,
you're like, what did you expect, dude?
Like, are we surprised? Like, are we surprised? Are we surprised with the outcome? Like,
yeah.
And it's not to be coy, but like, I think people know. I think they're aware. But I think, unfortunately, it just comes with a price. And I think we just have to decide when we're done paying that price. Or gambling, I should say.
Yeah. Well, happy Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's Day. Morbid relationship, no.
I know.
Go meet with somebody in person. Go meet someone in person.
Yeah.
Valentine's Day. Go meet someone in person. Talk to them. Get to know them. Right?
Yeah.
How about just just commit to being in a friendship for a while and start there, right?
Yeah.
Commit to meeting people in a friendship context that there's very low expectation with, but there's very high buy-in with.
Ooh, nice. Yeah. Low expectation, high buy-in.
Yes. To say, hey, I'm going to be this individual's friend, but I'm just going to be their friend. So I don't have to expect a ton from that because we're just friends.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to try.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm going to try.
Try what?
I'm going to try to be their friend.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's it. Nothing more.
Nothing more.
Just going to be a solid friend.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't have to get into any of this mess of whether or not.
What are we?
Yeah. What are we? Who texted who?
Yeah.
I was left unread. Like, no, like,
Yeah.
I think so many people, I think, don't know how to be easy. And when I say easy, I don't mean like easy in a context of like a negative context, like easy to go to bed with someone. I mean easy in a context. They don't know how to be an easy friend, right? To where I'm not going to take it personally if you don't text me back. I'm not going to take it personally if you leave me unread. I'm not going to take it personally, right? I'm not going to be constantly thinking about me.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Did you mean to do that to me?
Right.
What did you mean to say to me?
Yeah. Not
Why did
easily.
you leave me unread? Main topic is me.
Yeah.
Right.
How to be not easily offended.
Yes.
In
Right.
friendship. Yeah.
Yeah. So I call it just learning how to be easy. Yeah. So go be friends with somebody.
Yeah. Do that.
If you haven't already.
Yeah.
Or commit to that with somebody you already are friends with.
Yeah. How about that for Valentine's?
That's all I got. Happy Valentine's Day.
That's great. No, I love it. Great starting point.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Until next time.